Right, so we're now live streaming.
Thank you very much. Good morning, all. Welcome. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meeting page of the Council website. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the board who have video cameras to keep their video on the duration of the meeting and keep their microphone muted except when speaking. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by using the raised hand function. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question, and then mute it again. I would ask your patience if we run into technical problems, and should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time. So, I will begin the meeting with a roll call to establish who is present. When I call your name, please confirm by unmuting your microphone and stating that you are present. Martin Dax? Not yet. Val Lim?
Here.
Barry O'Sullivan?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Simon King is unwell and won't be joining. And Councillor Philippa Slatter is not with us yet. And myself, Councillor Dennis Payne. So Rhiannon, do we actually have any apologies for absence?
As you said, Councillor King is not available, and I've heard that that Martin Dax is also looking to be a little bit late.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Okay, I see no hands, so I will move on from that. Right, as a first item, we are being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 4th of November as a correct record. If members wish to raise anything related to the confidential part of that meeting, we would need to take this in confidential session. If members have questions, would they please use the usual mechanism. On the accuracy of the minutes only. Are there any issues that people wish to raise? I see no, I see at least one shake of the head. So I will, on that basis, I will take the minutes as approved, and I will sign a hard copy when the board next meets in person. Moving on, as an updated action log has been included in the papers, with all but one item actually complete. If any members have questions on the action log? Do any members have questions? No? Then no members have indicated that they wish to speak, so we will take the action log as noted. Item 3 is the administration report. I believe, Michelle, you will be taking that item.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, so I'll just run through the administration report in order and pick out some of the highlights of the report. So under section 3.
For me, Michelle has frozen. Is that okay?
Oh.
She's okay for me.
Is that any better, Dennis, or am I back?
I think for me, it's been, actually the chairman has been stuttering a little bit. So I'm not sure if it's at the chairman's end.
Yeah, that's the same for me, Mark, actually.
Yeah, and me.
Okay.
Perhaps
Okay. I will stop my video in an attempt to keep this going. Do carry on, Michelle.
Okay, thank you. So under the administration performance, couple of updates in that particular section. So as you'll see there, for the period October to December, 5 complaints were made informally and 2 compliments were received for that period. And in usual style, to put that into context, for that same period, 7,943 calculation tasks were completed. Under the member surveys, just one thing to highlight on this particular report. Unfortunately, we were unable to report on October and November statistics for this particular period. And this was due to a new reporting system that unfortunately didn't bring through the data in the same way as the old system did. So it didn't feel very meaningful information to bring to you this time. We've reverted to the old system now. So as you'll see under 3.4 there, the December statistics are there for that, and we will continue to use that system until we're confident that the new reporting system is reporting the same level of information as required. Under section 4, key performance indicators. So as you'll see there, it's been another good period for KPIs, just 2 that were missed and on amber ratings. And as you'll see under section 4.4, the explanation for those targets being missed due to a combination of training issues, some system issues, and some resourcing issues within that particular team. So as a result of that, as you'll see there, additional training has been delivered and additional resource has gone into that team now. So we shouldn't see a repercussion of that. Under the contribution section for September, October and November, all in the high 90s there, with the overall yearly average now up to 99.5%. On the internal dispute resolution procedures, so we've got 1 admin authority dispute and 1 employer dispute in that section. So under section 7.3, we've got 1 upheld decision at stage 1 in relation to an AVC payment. And for the employer dispute, these obviously go straight to the monitoring officer at Cambridgeshire County Council, and this is in relation to a Tier 3 entitlement award challenge, and the adjudication on that one isn't due until the 12th of February. So by our next meeting, we should have an outcome on that one. And under section 10, just the list of employer admissions and cessations. What I will do, I'll just make a comment on the private appendix, but obviously not going into any detail of the names of the employers. If anybody does want to talk in more detail about some of the specifics, we can obviously pick this up in the private session later. I just wanted to confirm that most of those employers now have paid their contributions for any that were missing. There was 1 employer where it accidentally went into a different bank account. That has now been resolved. There 1 employer on there that has been escalated. That is the only one that is still not resolved, and a payment plan is being looked at for that particular employer. And the only other thing I wanted to mention, and apologies, I don't know why I didn't put it in for this particular one, but under the reason and action, just really to confirm that all employers, as a matter of default, are reminded of their statutory obligations if they are on this list for either being late or unpaid. So I'll ensure for next time it's clear that that's the default position for those. But apart from that, I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Barry and then Val.
So without mentioning names, so we don't have to go into a private session, I was quite surprised in the cessations that the last employer on the list seems quite a big employer. It was just more a comment, but maybe they are not such a big employer. Maybe they don't have many members in the scheme.
That one is in public session on that
Oh,
one,
right.
but I don't know whether Corey might have an opinion on that as it comes into his area.
Yes, sorry, I
And-
haven't got the papers in front of me. I haven't been able to get them to load, so I don't know which employer it is on the list.
So under section 10, the Employers Admissions Associations, we've got Cambridgeshire Community Services NHS Trust.
Oh, you're right. Yes. So they had very few LGPS staff in the scheme, and the last active member did leave with that particular employer. So though they are a large organisation, most of the staff would be NHS scheme based.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that explains it. I thought it might be the case, but it's just when you see a large employer in the list, you get a bit surprised.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Val, you had a question.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Dennis. First of all, Michelle, I would like to thank you for anticipating some of my questions on 3 of the queries I had. So thank you ever so much for that. Can I just refer you to item 4.4, where we talked about the payment of retired benefits. You addressed points on training issues and resourcing. I just wondered the system issues, is that anything to do with the system issues we talked about in sort of 3.3, 3.4?
I'm not actually sure on this particular occasion what the system issue was. I can find out some more detail unless, Mark, do you know what the particular one was this on this occasion?
I mean, other than there have been occasional issues with the system in terms of you've probably seen quite a few emails where it's basically gone down and we've had to revert to an alternative method of access a few times over last month or so. That's the only thing that I'm aware of. The reporting issue was simply that we've been moving over a number of our reports to a far more powerful reporting engine, and indeed it's making some things very incredibly quick where we literally have standard reports already built and we just press a button and there. But with this particular one, we didn't parallel run it, was a lesson learned, to identify that we were not getting the same volume coming through as we did previously, and so therefore that's why we weren't able to issue the surveys to as many people as we normally could for a couple of months. But beyond that, that's all I know about the system issues. What we'll do is we'll check offline. If there's anything further than that, then we will let all applicable board members know.
Okay, Mark, it was to do with the payment of retirement benefits.
Yeah, sorry. So they use the Altair system. So when there is incredibly time sensitive, the retirement team. So if there is any slight quirks at the point you are hitting a deadline, you will cause a potential breach or a slower performance KPI. I think it's 5 working days, isn't it? We have been doing some benchmarking, if you like, with other funds, and we are way shorter in terms of timescale on that particular one than other funds, and it does mean it is affected with even a very small bit of downtime.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that, Mark. And Michelle, just one other point. On item 6.2, on the non-material breaches, the course of action. The course of action has been no further action at this stage. It's unlikely legislation surrounding this will be amended to remove the 5-year requirement. I've obviously noticed this particular course of action has been happening, you know, on quite a lot of the papers when we go through the administration report. I just wondered, have you any idea when the legislation is likely to change?
I don't, and you are correct in what you say. This obviously course of action, we've been waiting for this piece of legislation for quite a while now. Obviously, in terms of legislation going through, there's lots going on at the moment, and the government are obviously prioritising some areas over others. I haven't heard anything specifically on that one. I don't know, Mark, whether you've heard anything on that. No. So all I could do is obviously keep an eye out for that. And as soon as that changes, this, you know, it will eliminate this breach, and obviously therefore we won't see it going forward. But at the moment, I continue to put them all on the internal breaches log, just so that we've covered ourselves, and obviously bring them to you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. I've got no further queries. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Val. My apologies all. My internet feed is very variable at the moment. So I'm going to keep my camera off to give me the best chance of hearing everything. I will continue to test it separately, and if everything sorts itself out, I will come back on with my camera. The board is being asked to note that report, and I believe that we have done, so thank you. I'd like to move on now to the governance compliance report, and that I believe is another one for you, Michelle.
Yes, thank you. So again, I'll go through some of the key points as we go through the report. I'd probably say there's two main areas in this particular update. The first one on dashboards and the second one on the scam prevention strategy. So I'll just run through some of the key points in these areas. So as you'll see under section 2.1, a lot of developments happening and movement in the dashboard space now. So as you'll see, the regulations have now been put into force. They came into force on the 12th of December. So we are now legally working to the requirements of the dashboard regulations. Under section 2.1.2, just really an update on the consultation about the enforcement of dashboards. So a new consultation was released on the 24th of November, and it's looking at the compliance and enforcement aspects of dashboards. The consultation is looking at, well, the policy is looking at the key risks that will be focused on, what it expects schemes to do and their duties, how compliance will be monitored, and what the approach will be to non-compliance. The pension regulator, it's been quoted that the pension regulator will be taking a dim view of any non-compliance, and that was quoted last week. So we need to make sure that we are sticking to the schedules on this. The consultation for that particular one closes on the 24th of February. And if anybody's interested in looking at the questions there, the link is in the report. Just backtracking slightly on the original consultation, where there was some further clarification points that came out of that one. The key one there is the 6 months notice for the dashboard available point, which was for us is a very welcoming increase from the 90 days. So effectively now we're in a position where we are legally working to the September 24 connection date. We have been advised that connection to the dashboards could take up to 6 months. So we need to kind of factor that into our timescales. As part of the second consultation, as the available point, we will have 6 months notice, but we're still awaiting the Secretary of State to confirm what that date will be, so that we can look at obviously the data that will be required on the system. So the September date is literally a connection date, and then it will take it one step further at the available point, where some more information will be added to the dashboard in terms of our members. That information will still be quite high profile. So the intention from that is our members will then be able to contact us directly once they've located a benefit within our scheme, and contact us for some further information on that. So from our point of view, that's the point where we will start receiving queries, and there'll be timescales for us to respond to that. So we anticipate that as the dashboards go live, the pressure point might be quite tight to start with, because obviously we expect quite a few people to go on to have a look. So in terms of the 2.1.4, there's been some research happening as well from the Pension Dashboard Programme. So they've been looking into the likelihood of individuals connecting to the dashboards. They've interviewed and took online interviews with several participants from 18 to 75. The results of that at the moment are 57% of those participants are likely or very likely to use the dashboards. And what the background kind of comments with that is as the dashboards become more known to individuals and people become more aware, they'll expect that figure to rise as well. So they will be undertaking some more analysis at some point to see how that changes and how that develops over time. So in terms of the early participants connecting to the dashboards, so really just to mention on this particular section that there are 3 stages for this particular piece of work, and the main outcome of that for us, in fact all schemes, will be the experiences that feed into the development for the rest of us that will have later connection dates. So the process will be invaluable to iron out some of the potential issues that there might be at this stage. And then we hopefully, by the time we all connect, some of those issues will be ironed out. So it's a good piece of work there just to ensure that everything's working as they're expecting it to do, so to make it a bit easier for everybody else. So I think that's probably all I want to say on dashboards at this stage. So just moving on to the TCFD consultation, really just to confirm there that we did respond to the consultation, and our response was broadly in line with the proposals that were put. The next step will be for DLUC to release some further information of the results of that consultation. As you'll see there, the regulations are expected to be enforced by April 23, with the deadline for the first report being 1st of December 24. Just a comment really to say that actually a lot of the work on that has been happening behind the scenes anyway. So it's not going to be a massive shock what the requirements are for that. Work has already been undertaken. And just a comment to say that the Scheme Advisory Board did publish their consultation response, and that's under section 2.2.5 if anybody wants to have a look at that. So on to the pension regulator updates. So the enforcement and prosecution policies have been updated. I won't talk too much about those, but as you'll see in section 2.3.1.5, the links are there for those 3 policies, and these have really been updated in line with the dashboard regulations as well, to make sure that they all complement each other and that they all work together. So they are there now. So under section 2.3.2, scam prevention strategy, we've talked a bit before about this area in terms of things that we need to be doing to make sure our members are up to date with what's happening with scams, and especially because of the cost of living crisis. So the pension regulator, FCA and MAPS are all members of the Pension Scam Action Group. So they have collectively been raising awareness, particularly at this point in time because of the cost of living crisis. So the pension regulator has published a new strategy, and that strategy really looks at educating savers about potential scam threats, encouraging higher standards, preventing practices that lead to saver harm, and fighting fraud through prevention. So our role there is really about the higher standards and making sure that we are compliant with that strategy to make sure that our members are protected as much as they can be. We already do quite a lot of work and have been undertaking a lot of work in the scams area over the last while anyway. So we already have the red and amber flag system in place. We're very careful when we're making payments, making sure we do our due diligence to make sure that we're asking the right questions and challenging anything we're not comfortable with. We're also very good with our communications, making sure that all transfer outs have the appropriate wording, the leaflets, everything that we need to be doing. So we're already compliant in those areas. It's just a case now, the next step for me will be to analyse the strategy in a lot of detail to make sure that if there's anything else in there that I feel that we should be doing to make us as robust as possible. So these are the kind of areas where members are approached by potential fraudsters to transfer their benefits out of the scheme in order to, in most cases at the moment, what's been quoted is having early access to their money. So what's happening is the pension funds, because obviously we're bound by the regulations we work under, some of the incentive to move away from that is, you know, if you move your pension pot into this fund, you can have it straight away. And that, unfortunately, is at the moment, because people are in a different financial position to maybe they were a few years ago, it's just making the percentage of the people likely to do that higher. So that's why we particularly at this point in time are focused on this, as are the whole industry, and in fact other industries as well. So the part of that, this also, as you'll see later, also feeds into our risk register as well, because obviously we need to be aware and protect our members as much as possible. So that's the main body of the report. Just a couple of comments on the training plan at the end of the report. So one comment is that you may have remembered me mention previously about an online training platform that we were looking into. So we are going to go ahead with that. So the anticipated joining date for that will be end of February, early March. So what that platform will do is it will allow members to go on at their own convenience and to complete all the mandatory core training that we would expect board members and committee members to have. So once that goes live, that element of the training will be covered in terms of all the mandatory training. As we develop through the year and as we go through the business plan and see what other key topics are happening in the pension industry, the training plan will then be developed with the bespoke training that we feel will be appropriate for board members to receive. And I'll keep you updated of those if they come through as well. The only other thing to mention is the January 24 governance conference has now been announced. So that again will be a hybrid conference, which you can either attend at York, or if you didn't want to travel it, there's an online version as well. This year's conference was last week. I found it quite a useful conference, but I didn't know whether at this point, Councillor Payne or Barry wanted to, or in fact, Val, you were there as well, weren't you? Had any additional comments that you wanted to make about the conference at all?
Barry, would you your hand is up?
So it's actually one of my comments, but it related to the conference. So Michelle stole my thunder about the pensions regulator being quoted. It was at the conference that they would take a dim view about the not getting pensions dashboards right. That was actually at the conference. And another thing he actually said was that that the dashboard should be on every meeting agenda. I know it is in this case, but that's what he was kind of stressing, how important it is. So every single pension committee or pension board meeting, we should be discussing the dashboard, because September 24 will soon come around. As for the rest of the conference, it was quite useful. There was basically a lot of talk of us still waiting for legislation to take things forward. It was kind of when we had the lawyer giving an update, she was saying it was basically like Groundhog Day. We were still waiting for the same pieces of legislation to go through that she talked about last year. And the only sort of really learning point I got, they really stress how important communication is, both with employers and with members, to basically solve problems. If you keep regular contact with both parties, then that should help a lot. And again, the pensions regulator sort of related, but said it's all about good administration. So yeah, that's what I got from the conference anyway.
Thank you, Barry. Mark, your hand's up.
Yes, I was just going to obviously just remind you all that the admin software contract ends on the 30th of September 2024. And so a really critical thing for our fund is betraying no confidence is obviously the procurement process to procure some new software, which will conclude a year in advance of that contract end date, is going to obviously really test what the pension dashboard solution is in whatever we put in place. But that is, on the face of it, obviously something we ideally wouldn't have, but we have no choice in this matter.
Thank you. Val.
I really just want to add a couple of points onto what Barry said. I totally agree with what he said. I just want to say, for me personally, the second day I found much more interesting and more aligned to where my interest actually lies, and that's within governance, and actually with the current financial situation at the moment, with all the sort of the investment side of things. So for me, second day was actually the one that really ticked my boxes. I haven't got anything else to add.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Michelle, one question, if I may. On scams, do we, how many, have you picked up any potential threats or scam attempts?
Not directly, as this is an absolute scam, but I would probably say through the casework processing, there will be cases that hit some of those, maybe not red, but maybe amber flags, where we've had to make sure that we've taken extra assurance to make sure that we're confident of what we're paying. I don't know of any particular cases of scams, not recently. Obviously, our processes have changed a lot because of this area, and some of the older cases that may have gone through a few years ago that we've learnt lessons from. Some of those obviously may come out of the woodwork, but in terms of current processes, I think we're quite robust in the way that we're operating now, that we wouldn't expect one to go through. But Mark, you might have a comment on that.
Only that certainly in other areas of WNC, so the entity we work for, there have been scam attempts that to try to get money, for example, through the creation of this is probably more of the accounts payable area. So they've all been stopped, but there have been absolutely been a few isolated attempts at getting money out of the organisation.
Okay, thank you. Barry, you had another one?
Yeah, I just forgot the other thing that I thought was quite good to raise at the conference. They said about the importance of communication, but it said don't forget to provide a phone line. So there's so much emphasis on electronic communication, but the value for some people, electronic communication, they don't have access to it. So the value of having a phone line that people can ring with their issues. So that was the point I forgot earlier.
And Val?
Dennis, really just following on from what your question was, I did have a similar question which I actually wanted to raise during the risk register discussion, and I've got probably a question sort of to continue what you were saying. So I wonder if I could raise that a little bit later in the meeting during the risk register.
That would be good. Thank you. Can I just add for everybody else just a few comments? Totally agree with Barry about so much is still to happen, but I think what I also picked up is that there is still a great deal of change that has happened. There's consultation on a couple of issues which will be retrospective, which again is, they may not be large, but they're more work again. I liked on the knowledge assessment, you may have seen recently a published 2022, which suggested that pension board members rather outscored our committee colleagues, certainly in the sample that was made there, which was interesting. And there was a presentation from a Welsh administration manager who's found that if employers or where employers are prepared to allow permanent work from home, then the market for staff actually becomes UK-wide, with location no longer being a barrier. That was interesting. And I think the final comment I would make was in Hyman's report of the conference, where they said we should cherish our administrators. I'm sure everybody would totally agree with that. We are being asked to note that report, and I believe that is what we have done. And now on to the overpayment of pension entitlement policy. And Michelle, this is down to you again.
Yeah, and then a little break, and you'll hear from some other people after this one.
Well, you can have a break, yes.
So, yep, this is the revised overpayment of pension entitlement policy. As you'll see, the detail is all under section 3.1 of the report, where we've listed there the proposed changes. In Appendix 1, you've got the track change version and the clean version in Appendix 2, just for completeness, so that you can see the proposed changes. I think it's probably fair to say that the actual pension policy in terms of the pension payment remains largely unchanged. Just some clarification points on some of the sections in there, to include things like pension credit members, and just to tighten up some of the wording on some of those areas. And this is because we've had the policy in place now for quite a few years. So as each review has come round, we've been continually tightening up the policy to make sure it's fit for purpose in line with our working practices. So that side of the policy all works very well. So very few changes on that element. I think the biggest change to this particular update is the inclusion of lump sum overpayments that have not featured in the policy before. And this was because we were the likelihood of a pension lump sum overpayment is quite small in comparison to the pension overpayments, which are a lot more common. However, what we have noticed over the last little while is that not having anything in a policy therefore lends to some inconsistencies. So we just wanted to make sure that if an overpayment did occur on a lump sum, that everybody was aware of the process for dealing with those to make sure it was a consistent approach for members and obviously internally, and reclaiming that money back as well. So the types of these overpayments, which is why they don't happen very often, would need to really come from incorrect information being provided. So a couple of examples, an employer or a payroll provider completing a wrong leaver certificate may, lend to a benefit being paid that wasn't due, and that would need to be reversed. Or likewise with a member filling in a form incorrectly, they may tick to say that they've got no other benefits elsewhere. That turns out to be incorrect, and therefore there's potentially a benefit that we can't legally pay, and that would need to be reversed. And additionally, that officers make mistakes or could make a mistake and pay something incorrectly as well. I'd probably say that was less likely because we have quite strict processes to make sure that all payments are double checked, but it could happen. So really, to cover those three scenarios, the overpayment element has been put into the policy. Just really a note about the policy itself. So every section is separate to make sure that it's clear, possibly a little bit repetitive in the way that the overpayment sections are put into those policies. But the intention is that officers and members, if they're disputing the way that we're handling with these, can go to one particular section that applies to them, and everything is in that one place. So the intention is now, obviously this policy is coming to you now from a pre-scrutiny perspective, for you to let me know whether you think it's appropriate or if there's anything that we need to add. The next course of action will be to take it to the Pension Committee in March for approval, and following that it will be published on our pensions website in the usual way, so that it's transparent for everybody to see. I'm happy to take any questions on the policy or receive any recommendations of how it could be improved.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Val, you have a question.
Michelle, I've only got one query really, and that is to do with Appendix 1 in respect of the limitation period examples. I think some of these examples must have been in much earlier versions, this policy, because some of the examples just seem really old, and some of them are going back sort of like getting on for 20 years in some cases. I just wonder, do the dates need pulling forward, so they feel a little bit more relevant?
Yep, thank you. So you are correct. That particular appendix was in older versions. So what I can do, I can have a look to see if some of that information can be sought elsewhere with some up-to-date examples. And yeah, I'll have a look at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's all my queries are.
Thank you. Councillor Slatter.
Yeah, and apologies for late arrival. Hope you got a message. If not, I was in another meeting about health services. And forgive me again if I have missed it. I can't see in the clean copy a reference to a time after which an overpayment will not be clawed back. I mean, if somebody's had it, thought it was theirs, spent it, is there a time after which the error can't be corrected?
Yeah, I think most of that. is probably this limitation period in Appendix 1 to when we can and can't claim. I would probably say that from a fund perspective, that the intention for anything over £250 would be expected to be reclaimed. So that would be the stance of the fund, unless we couldn't because of any limitation restrictions. However, there will always be examples where we might have to write off overpayments, either pension or lump sum elements for particular circumstances. But in those circumstances, what we would do is we would need to ask for specific evidence to support that overpayment. So I think,
sorry, I don't know whether I phrased my question clearly enough. What I'm saying is that if the mistake is discovered quite a long time after it was made, is there a limit on when the pension fund can reclaim it and actually start proceedings to reclaim, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so that particular element is in the limitation period. So we would have to...
I read it wrongly, Ren. I thought it was all about spinning it out a bit and doing it by instalments. But if it is in there, fine. And what is the time that which you can just hang on to it?
So it all depends on, I think that's why this bit's a little bit complicated, because it depends on the circumstances around the overpayment. So what you have in Appendix 1 is different scenarios of the when the overpayment began, when they're finished, how it's come about. And then you've got your limit.
Can you tell me what paragraph we're on? Because I must have missed it. I'm just thinking just in terms of natural justice.
So in the actual appendix itself, the policy, under Appendix 1, it just says limitation period examples.
What page are you on?
I've got an...
Okay, I don't want to...
It's page 63 of the pack.
Is it? Thank you, Corey.
Right. And that's the clean copy, isn't it? Because I was looking at the clean copy. No, it's not the clean copy, it's the draft 63.
Yeah. It is a bit of a complex area.
Sorry, I'm looking at the appendix, I suppose, the appendix.
Yeah, I suppose because it's an appendix within appendix, yeah.
Yes. So the page number, thank you very much, whoever chipped in. Right.
Michelle, whilst Councillor Sass was looking at that, can you 13.1 appears to indicate a limitation period, but then moves on to identify that the period of limitation shall not begin until the fraud, concealment or mistake is begun, which appears to suggest that that 6-year limitation is unrealistic, because if once you've found a problem, you've then got 6 years. The problem was 20 years ago, but you've now found it today, you've still got 6 years. That just seems to go against natural justice.
Yeah, I will double check those particular sections. These are ones that aren't pension fund specific. So these are ones that are kind of a wider HMRC kind of aspect on limitation periods. So I can't say that I'm particularly an expert in this area. It's probably just wording that we've used previously. So leave that whole section with me and I will just double check to make sure that that all makes sense and is up to date and consistent just before it goes to pension committee.
Grand. I think it's referred to as the discovery date, and that might be in the Limitation Act in 1980, which might be the more general one that Dennis has just mentioned. If we have an actual number of years after which time the overpayee is safe, because it would be unreasonable to reclaim it, that'd be useful to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll see if I can make it a little bit clearer in there. No problem.
That certainly ties into Val's points about the dates. In that appendix. Thank you. If there are no more points on that. I think we have certainly reviewed that policy and now move on. Item 6 is the communication strategy and plan. Corey, are you presenting this or is Sharon?
Sharon, if Sharon's got sound, I know Sharon was struggling at the beginning of the meetings, but if Sharon's got sound, Sharon will be presenting.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Sharon.
Great. Sorry about the trouble at the start. I've logged in outside of the network now, which seemed to help. Yeah, so I'll give you an update on our communication strategy, communications plan and website review project, each of which have their own separate appendices. So with our communication strategy, we've made the usual sort of update in terms of the number of employers and the number of members. You'll probably notice that there's quite a leap in the deferred members, and we've changed the way that we're recording those now, just so that we're consistent with the report and accounts that are published as well. So previously we didn't include the undecided leavers, but in our more recent strategy, we've included those within the deferred members. So I just wanted to highlight that just in case you thought that was a slight anomaly. So we're jumping to sort of 5.1.3. We updated the strategy to include our lifestyle communications and the way that we're trying to make communications more engaging by linking around different life events. So people are quite reluctant and quite often they'll switch off when you mention the word pension, but so we're trying to link it to things that they might be motivated to think about and a bit more exciting, like getting married or starting a family or getting a promotion. And then we're trying to link in and say, well, what things do you need to think about your pension in those certain life stages? 5.1.4, we've added a bit in on performance indicators, and we're going to start measuring ourselves against other pension funds. So we're going to benchmark our registrations for people signing up to their online pension account, and also those members that have opted out of receiving electronic communication. Moving on the communications plan, 5.3 and appendix 2, as well as our usual communications activities that happen on an annual basis, like our statement programme. We're finishing off our valuation activities, and also a key focus for us this year will be obviously the McLeod pension dashboard project. And again, in the interest of trying to engage with our members more, we're linking in and supporting activities like Pension Awareness Week and Pension Attention Campaign. 5.6, we also were given the opportunity to update you on the website review project. And basically this is looking at both of our employer websites and our members' websites. And the aim will be to give recommendations on how we could improve, move or replace both of these websites. We've held some detailed interviews with our members and employers and looked at how they navigate. We gave them a scenario of trying to find information on our current websites, and we observed how they navigated our websites to try and find that information. And as well as the detailed interviews, we also conducted a higher level survey to find out what was the main things that people were looking for when they were looking at our websites. And we managed to get over 1,700 responses. So the digital team were absolutely delighted with the response rates on that. They also added a section at the back to say, people, if you'd like to help us further with these, to give us your details, so we can contact you again. And so we've got a really good pool now of people that are happy to help us with the project going forwards. So that was really pleasing. And then in terms of the next steps for our website review, we're focusing on restructuring the content of the website, and we're going to test a personalised approach with different search and navigation options. One of our observations was obviously that not everybody chooses the same way to navigate the sites. So we need to make a variety of options available to people and make it clear on the different ways that they can navigate the sites. We're also creating prototypes of our proposed pages to test with members and employers, because obviously if we are to roll out new content or new pages to a website, we want to make sure that they're sort of thoroughly tested before we then replicate the page design across the rest of the site. Like I say, there's a lot more detail in the appendices, but if anyone did have any questions, I'd be happy to take them now.
Barry, over to you.
So you mentioned that we actually said the undecided leavers will be included and are included as part of deferred, but I just think the policy needs to be explicit, actually say that that's where they're included as deferred members.
Yes,
I think it doesn't actually say in that paragraph, but it just says that they are included.
I think in the communication strategy we do reference that, right. Barry, I think.
Or maybe it was just I was looking at the executive summary and it didn't actually say that. I've got some other points as well. So
okay, yeah.
Okay.
I think it might have been taken out. Sorry, Barry. Yes, I think we need to insert it back in.
Sorry, Sharon, if I can come in there.
Yeah.
In terms of the strategy, so undecided leavers is something that we recognise internally within the service, but it's not an official status that exists for members. They should be one of the other statuses. We just, for some reason or another, haven't been able to process them into the correct status yet. Usually this happens because we've not got complete leaver information. So the best assumption to make is that they are deferred members. But I don't think that we would want to specify specifically in the strategy, though in internal working documents, we certainly recognise that that's the case.
Yeah, it was missing from the executive summary, so I just thought it. So it is internal. It just needs to be a bit more explicit because I just wondered at that point. So the other thing, I think it's more a general point. I didn't really see within the document. It became clear at the conference that it's the age-old thing that we need better promotion of the 50-50 section. And I think that could be included. But I think it came up at the conference that some employers are even worried that they should even be mentioning it in case they, they're giving financial advice. But yeah, I just think our communication strategy, we should be promoting 50-50.
Yes, so if people look to opt out of the scheme, we do mention to them that the benefits of the 50-50 scheme, and perhaps they might be able to afford to start contributing, drop down to contributing half of their contributions, and then obviously emphasising that they'll still get the full ill health benefits and family protection. It's a fine balance that we kind of struggle with, as you say, between offering financial advice, not wanting to offer financial advice, and trying not to tell people to do things. Yeah, but it's certainly, I take your point with the whole cost of living crisis at the moment. It's certainly something we perhaps need to think about more this year.
And then I think my last point is that in the tables about different stakeholders and how we communicate, I didn't see pension board in there.
Oh.
I see pension committee, I see staff, but I don't see pension board.
I do apologise, and that certainly should be added in. Thank you for
I'm sure
pointing that out.
I'm sure I got invited to participate, but said I really didn't know enough about it. And I tried to pass the buck to my predecessor as a county councillor who's on the pension fund, Councillor Ashwood. Whether she dealt with it or not, I don't know. I think we were asked right at the beginning.
Yes.
As members. No resentment here, but maybe I could be more useful in future.
Val, you had a question.
Actually, I've got a few questions. I'm sorry about this, Sharon.
Okay.
Okay, page 97, which talks about brand identity.
Yeah.
There is, it's the fourth bullet down. It says the pension fund board will be required to sign off high-level branding decisions. That seems a little strange.
Yeah, I don't think that should be sign off. I think it's more about that we will use you as a sounding board for communications and things like the pensioner newsletter. We include you in the review and sign off process, I think is what that's meant to be alluding to. But yes, that wording can be changed to better reflect what we're actually meaning there.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Corey. And then on the confidentiality, it said the fund is registered under Data Protection Act 1998. Now, this was actually 1998 Data Protection Act was actually superseded by GDPR, which I think is also called the Data Protection Act 2018. Does that need updating?
I'll defer to Michelle on that one, if I may.
You're on mute, Michelle.
Sorry. Yes, we'll have a look at that and get the reference updated to the most current appropriate one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got a few more actually. Page 100, you're talking about, this is one on your table, implementation of communication of key objectives. Under one of your measures of success, a reduction in the number of members opting out of the scheme. I just wondered, what starting point do you have? You know, sort of, if you're actually reviewing whether things are getting better, you must have a starting point, say there's, I don't know, 500 at the moment, you know, sort of how will you monitor the actual opt-out rate? Do you have some, you know, sort of historical information on this? You know, and what is your measure going to be as to—
I'll come in there, Val. So we did, when we were looking at the strategy, we did ask our systems team to run some information for us on the number of members that have opted out of the scheme. So we'll be using that as a benchmark, the rate of opt-out in the year. So how many people actually completed it in the year. And then in future years, we will look at that number again on a year-by-year basis, just to make sure that it's not going in the wrong direction. Obviously there is only so much we can do to control that number, unfortunately, but it brings us back to one of the points that Barry was saying, and I was going to come in at that point around promoting the 50-50 scheme. The strategy for me isn't a place to promote certain particular things itself, but what we do want to see in the strategy is that is one of our objectives, to maintain people in the scheme, to reduce, you know, to maximize the people coming in and reduce the people going out, and promotion of the 50-50 scheme is one of the ways that we will do that. We've added that into communication, and just to reassure you, we've been quite open about cost of living pressures with people in our lifestyle communications. So that's the way I'd like to reflect it in the strategy, rather than a statement saying something about the 50-50 scheme itself.
Yeah, this was actually more to do with promote the scheme as a valuable benefit, you know, emails, texts, electronic letters. I don't think it actually particularly mentioned the 50-50 scheme. And I just wonder, you know, if you have a measure, you know, you're saying what your success is, then surely you would have to have, you know, some targets at some point in time, you know, maybe a bit for, you know, on your tactical sort of information as to how good, how, you know, is this making you happy? Is there, if you're below target, do you actually then need to actually discuss how, you know, sort of you're doing sort of a certain item, and whether you need to actually amend that, you know, the flags?
Yeah, so With that, I think it's really hard because, as we say, you know, this is a lifestyle choice that people make, whether they're in the scheme or they're not. It's something that they free. So we don't have a target number of people that we want to have in the scheme, or a target number that we want to see of opt-outs being below. For me, it's a year-on-year comparison. So are we having more or less opt-outs than we had previously? If we're having more, then clearly we need to look at the communications and ramp up how we get people to stay in the scheme. If that's promoting the 50-50 even more obviously than we currently do, then that might be one of the objectives that we put in for the following year. So I think it's a year-on-year comparison rather than setting an arbitrary number, which we can't control.
Okay. No, I know you can't control it, but you know, it's just sort of a flag thing. Actually, we're not doing as well as we would like to do here. And also, is there any value in actually talking to the people who really do want to go to find out why they want to go? And that would then be a communication and give you an idea of what lies behind, you know, some of the numbers.
Yeah, we need to look into what we could and could not talk to people about, because obviously there will be GDPR issues and things like that. What do we have the right to know? What do we not have the right to know? But that's something we could certainly look into. As I say, for me, the measure of success is compared to the previous year. If we've got less people opting out than the previous year, that is positive. If we've got more people opting out than the previous year, then that's negative, and we need to do something around that. That's how I'd be looking to manage that. But yeah, I'll take the point on board about whether there could be a version of an exit questionnaire as such for members, but we would need to look into the regulations behind that and whether we could actually collect that information.
Okay, I've probably got one or two others yet. Page 101. Okay, next, just another point on page 101. You talked about effective and timely communications be sent to all stakeholders in clear language. I mean, who will actually determine what is actually clear language?
Well, that's very subjective.
Yeah, that's really why
So,
the
the test on that is clearly, you know, how much follow-up do we have on communications in terms of people still querying the main message that we're trying to get out to them. Again, if it's depending on the communication and what we're aiming to do, there will be different measures for things. So if it's opt-outs, for example, and we're trying to communicate the 50-50, if people are opting out and not taking up, is it clear enough what we're saying? You know, are we spelling that out clearly enough? The one thing we do have is we have a registration with Plain English Society, and they do review our documentation and they do review the website. So we use their version of what we consider to be plain language. But I do appreciate that not all organizations that do that agree on the same thing. But that is the one that we subscribe to. Sharon's actually doing a diploma course with them at the moment as well, to make sure that we've got those skills and knowledge in the organization. So we're doing the best we can on that, but I do appreciate we can't please everybody, and we will never get this 100% right by everyone's standards.
Okay, thanks, Corey, for that. Okay, page 103, it talks about self-service. All members of the fund have been offered access to personal online pension account. I just want to, there's, you know, people around that still don't obviously have the internet. Even people of my age don't have the internet. So it's just a communication point, really.
Sharon, I don't know if you want to come in there.
No, we do recognise that, and it's like we're getting to a point now where we just really would like to record people's preferences, because we do recognise that there will be some people without technology, and if we have their preferences recorded, then we know that we can communicate with them by post, include telephone numbers and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, a lot of communication is moving towards the digital format, but there'll always be a handful of people that you know, for them it's not for them.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd add to what Sharon has said there as well is I think one of the evidence shows as well, you've got to be very careful with the assumptions on who does and who doesn't use digital software. Our pensioners are actually our biggest proportion of any single group of membership that have signed up for the use of the I think they're around 47%, Sharon, aren't they, the pensioners? Sorry, 37%. Everyone else is close down to 30%. So they're about 7 percentage points in terms of their group compared to our actives and deferred members. So you really can't tell how it's going to go. So as Sharon says, it is just about recording personal preferences and then acting upon those.
Okay. Page 104. top line reads, a scheme member can opt out of electronic communication at any time, informing us in writing or by email they wish to do so. I just wondered, does phone need to be included in that?
We would like an audit trail to be able to confirm that that's what they wanted to do. So we would prefer to have it in writing. So if they call us and they tell us that that's what they want to do, we will just ask them to follow up with a note on that. So we've got something on the record.
Yeah, I see your point for that. But some, you know, from the customer point of view, they're probably going to go, well, I've just called you and now you flipping want me to send you a letter.
I appreciate that. I do. It's but I think it is important that we've got something on record from that member to says that's how they want to communicate. You know, communication methods are the way that fraudsters can get into things and cause you not to be able to communicate with the right person. Obviously, the digital communication where they register, they sign in is the most secure way to do it, which is why that's our preference. So if someone wants to deviate from that, we want to make sure that it is the correct person and we've got something on record that show that we are following their preferences if it's queried in the future.
Yeah, I do see your point. It is a difficult one, I admit, but yeah. Let me see what else I've got.
Val, can I move on to the others whilst you're looking, please?
Yes,
Come
okay.
back.
Okay.
Well, I had a related question, if I can come in. I can't see what other people, who else has got their hands up, I'm afraid.
I do actually have Barry,
Okay.
who was ahead of you, Councillor Sapper. Barry?
Yes, really quick, because I forgot to mention it again. So related to the page 108, related to the tables about stakeholders, I did notice an obvious omission from the external bodies, the Scheme Advisory Board.
Yeah, thank you.
That was it.
Thanks, Barry.
Councillor Slatter, back to you, if I may.
Yes, it's chasing the people who find it hard to communicate with the board administrator, the pension administrators again. And I know a lot of time can be spent on a very few people, but they're probably ones who need that. If people need help to access the internet, there are ways of doing that. And no doubt in practice, our representatives do that, you know, using Age UK or so on, and avoiding scammers or fraudsters. I hope so, because obviously it is good to have a written trail, if not a paper trail, for the inquiries. But not everybody can, even if they've been able to in the past. Sometimes people lose that facility, either technically or personally. Thanks. Do we use, do we enable escorts to access?
It would be, that's a really difficult one in terms of escorts. I mean, we provide the registration details to the member. If they get somebody to assist them with that, that is up to them as a member. What we do have is if we get something like a power of attorney letter in, then obviously we honour that and we'll deal with the person that the power of attorney says we can do. If we've got authorization from somebody to speak to someone who's working on their behalf, usually a solicitor, but it could be an advocate of some sort, I guess, as well, then we would act on that as long as we're able to identify that it is the member that's given us that permission to do that. What we're not going to do, though, is give the online access to an advocate like that. That would have to be through the member, and using it with the member present would be the way that we'd want that to happen.
Fine. So with safeguards, you can do that either sort of alongside the grandchild or whatever. But when you obviously need to be satisfied it's the right that they're not being coerced. Thank you. I'm
Absolutely,
sure you are.
yeah.
I'm asking the obvious, but just, you know, sort of my job sort of thing.
Of course, of course.
Thank you. Val, do you have any more?
It was only one, and Barry had picked it up about the board not being on the table. So that's all been done. So
apologies for that. Yeah, thank you.
If I may, I just have a few points. Through the document, you sometimes have plain English with a capital P or a lowercase p. I'm assuming that plain English is the campaign version. If we're going to, just be great to have a level of consistency there, whether we know it's the campaign version or not. going back to the point on clear language, I have a concern on the measure here. Material has gone out to parish councils on, it's one of our policies, and I've mentioned that in previous meeting, but parish councils not coming back and saying we couldn't make sense of this, I don't think is a measure of whether or not that was clear. I don't know what the answer is to that, but it's just a comment. That lack of response doesn't mean to say it's been understood. It just means you sent it and they didn't respond.
Yeah, I agree with you completely there, Councillor Payne, and that's why part of the comment was what we're trying to achieve with that communication, and whether that comes through will also be part of that measure. As you say, it's a very difficult one. Yeah.
And then a final question. All the work on the website looks excellent, particularly like the lifestyle stuff that's been shown to be very effective elsewhere. So that's excellent. But one thing going through my mind is actually whether we measure the website usage. And therefore we can actually test whether employers who, for example, say, it would be really great to have X, once you've got it, will they actually come back and actually do use it? There's all sorts of website monitoring tools, and you'll see the domains where the requests are coming in from, and I'd just like to know whether all the effort you're putting in is really being used by the employers who say they'll need it.
We will, as part of the brief to the digital team, the ability to be able to monitor the pages and the usage of the pages is part of that, so we can get some analytics back and try and see, you know, like you say, if people are actually using what they asked for. Not obviously down to the exact person, but you know, just how the and as part of one of the things we were looking to do for the homepage was to have the most popular used pages up front to be sort of changed on a regular basis.
We do have some baseline information from the current website in terms of bounce rates and things like that the digital team have gathered for us, and that is one of the metrics for the success of the new website. In their planning project, they included a list of things that they'll be looking at to make sure that the website project's been successful, and that is based on the metrics you mentioned. Okay,
Sharon, you mentioned not down to the individual person. Totally agree. Down to the you can go down though to the major employers. So the number of hits from the Cambridgeshire County Council, South Cambs, etc., etc. And that I think might be interesting to see.
Yeah, we tried to do something like that once before, and with some organisations it's possible. With the larger ones that have a dedicated footprint, you can do that. With some of the employers, it doesn't register that it's come from that employer because it's just the IP address that you get, for example. So we'll have to see how that works in practice.
I did run the county's website team for a bit, Corey, so totally understand those points. Yes. Okay, we've been asked to review the contents of this report. I think we've fairly thoroughly done that, so thank you very much all. Can we move on then to the Pension Fund Annual Report and Statement of Accounts? Ben, I think that was your good self. So over to you.
It is. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's a lot of pages here and 3 sort of hefty documents, so I'll try and pick out the highlights for you. So this is a fully audited set of accounts that we're bringing before you. They've been audited by EY, that's Ernst & Young. They have 1 more year with us, and then we'll be moving on to another auditor who I won't name here just in case. The accounts have been produced in line with the SIPFA guidance. They've been done within the timescales requested or needed to be reached. They have been seen as a draft and a final set at both the Pension Committee and the Audit Committee, and have been quite well received, thankfully, by committee members, senior management and auditors. I'll start on the annual set of accounts, and then I'll see if you've got any questions on that, and I'll move on to the ISA 260 or the auditor's finding reports, if that's okay with everyone. So to give you a whistle stop on this sort of year-to-year movements in the accounts, if I could ask you to concentrate on page 199 of the packs. So that is the fund account. For the old school accountants in the room, that's basically the income statement or the profit and loss. I have got Fiona on the call as well, should any of your questions be of a more transactional or detailed nature, because she's very much at the cold face on these accounts. So yeah, page 199, fund account. Hopefully you can see the contributions have gone down. That is as we would expect. So that's in line with membership. There was actually increased deficit payments in the previous year, 2021, and we've seen a reduction in deficits this year. That is because with in the valuation period of 3 years, quite often deficit payments are paid in the first year of the 3. So that we would expect to see more last year than this year. So that checks out. And with all these numbers, we obviously have a few controls and checks to see the numbers make sense. And obviously they've been audited as well, and they check our checks. Transfers in, they've gone down. That's very much a demand-led thing. So we're happy there. Benefits have gone up. That is in line with active pensioner numbers and also inflation. Payments to, this is essentially transfers out. So again, they're demand-led really. If someone decides to move their pensions, it's a difficult one to budget, but we do some budgeting on that based on average numbers over the years. No surprises there. Management expenses are largely unchanged. I think the only points here to pick out are that access, actuarial and audit costs did all increase slightly, but overall we haven't got a real a change there. Obviously there's a number of checks we do within those as well to monitor. Investment income, again, that's largely unchanged. I would point out really that although we refer it there in the accounts as SIPFA asks us to, our real check of fund managers' return is the market value gained. So the last line, the profit and loss on disposals, it is less than last year, but it's still quite a healthy return. I'll point out that Russia invaded Ukraine on the 24th of February. So before that, you've actually not got much volatility in the market, and you've actually seen quite a good return on the year. Obviously, we might not see the same story when I show you the accounts next year, to bear in mind from as markets with all the volatility that you'll see at the moment. So that's pretty much the fund accounts. That's the profit and loss. If I can move on to page 200 of the pack. So this is the net asset statement, or the balance sheet, as you may know it. So we've got, I'll just work down the lines here. Investment assets, they've gone up. That again reflects the returns generated by the managers. Investment liabilities have gone down. That is mainly due to a higher number in 2021. That was due to a timing issue on a derivative rollover. So basically there's money that we pulled out of a derivative that was waiting to be invested somewhere else. So it just sat on our account and showed on our trial balance on the 31st of March last year. But it's actually just a timing issue and then bounced into a fund manager account transaction. So there's no issues with that one, we don't think, and nor did the auditors, thankfully. Current assets, they've gone down. Nothing significant here. That's mainly led by the contributions accrual. So that is any contributions that are paid in April that relate to March contributions. We have to do an accrual in the accounts to make sure it's correctly posted in the right time period. And then finally, the current liabilities, largely unchanged between years. and that is a business as usual movement. So they're mainly small balances within payroll control accounts that are ironed out monthly, quarterly. So again, no issues were felt there. Shall I pause there on the accounts if there's any questions before I move on to the auditor's findings report?
Thank you, Ben. Yes. I see no questions, so please do carry on.
Okay, great. And if there is, I can always come back, so that's fine. Yeah, so if I can highlight page 235 of the packs. So this is what we call the ISA 260, or basically the auditor's findings report. Again, this has gone, well, this was presented by the auditor himself at both Pension Committee and Audit Committee. It's all good news, really. They've basically found, following their audit, follow all their audit work and their checks against us. That's an interim audit as well as a final office-based audit. That the accounts are clear of material misstatement. They give a true and fair view to the reader, and most importantly, it's an unqualified opinion. So the clean audit, the lack of material misstatement and the true and fair view is reflected on page 241 of the report, and their wording on the unqualified opinion is on page 250 of their report. Most pleasing of all, probably there's no recommendations they have made, which is kind of rare, really. Even if they usually just have a minor point, if no major ones. And then the most important point probably in there, or the most interesting point there's one uncorrected non-material misstatement. So this relates to level 3 investments, which are those that are harder to value. So in our case, they're basically private equity and property. So it takes longer to get a property valuation, as you expect, than it would be an equity, where we can just look on the market and it's got a price each day, or even each minute, each hour. So it's very hard to get property. So we have to do a level of estimation on what that figure is at the time the auditors come in. So the auditors basically just have to look at how we've done our estimate, which we would do in line with SIP for guidance. They are happy with how we did that estimate, but there is a slight change between the real figure that's come out at the time of the audit and what we put in at the time of putting the accounts together. So the difference is a 10.3 million. Just to put that into context, the materiality they set was 43 million. So they were happy with our process in getting the estimate, and they were happy for us to leave it unadjusted. But I will point out we did offer to change the accounts to make them even cleaner, but they were happy with that in there. And then the final point I'll make is that you'll see that it's got, in big red marking, it's got draft still stamped on there, ISA 260. And that is simply because until the local authority accounts are signed off, our accounts are not signed off, because we just go in as an insert to the back of the full local authority account. So we are waiting on the local authorities before we can draw a line in the sand and say these are a complete, fully audited set of accounts, because there's always a chance that something might happen which might mean our going concern note changes, for instance. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ben. Are there any questions? I must say I'm impressed with an audit that doesn't raise any issues. Slightly more used to that at parish council level, but 404 billion, different matter. Barry, over to you.
I really only have the one. It's just it sort of jumped out at me on the page. So page 161.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the total management expenses. So compared to last year, it's like huge. Is there any explanation of that?
So I'm just flicking between pages. 161. So this is the forecast. So this is actually the forecasted amounts against the actual. So Yeah, we will have got some. Have you got anything on that, Fiona? I know we will have done some large working papers on that, but have you got anything we can?
Yep. So the forecast is only invoiced expenses, whereas the actual is invoiced and non-invoiced costs from investment managers. So this gets raised quite a lot at committee. So for next year's budget and forecast, we will be including an estimate of non-invoiced income. So that number on the accounts doesn't look so strange.
So it's an issue on our budgeted figure rather than the real figure.
Okay, that explains it. So I just saw the massive difference, that's all.
Yeah, it does jump out.
Yeah.
I don't see any more hands raised. Thank you very much, Ben and Fiona. We have been asked to note the report and the findings of the external audit, and that I believe we have done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chair.
We now have a conflicts of interest policy, and I believe this one is with you, Michelle.
Yes, thank you. Not really too much to say on this policy. I think most of the information was provided at the training session in November, which fully covered off the purpose of the policy. So really just a few comments around where we are now. So the policy has now been approved by the pension committee. So the policy is in force from the 14th of December. So just a reminder to board members that if you did not attend the training in November, it would be still really beneficial to watch the recording that was circulated to understand the policy that's in place. The next step is for me to send out the declarations as part of the policy. And as I've put there, this will be done by the 31st of January. Not long, it might even be done this afternoon with any luck. So I'll get these out to you. So if they could be completed in accordance with the policy, and then obviously when they come back into me, I will update our conflicts of interest register to make sure that we're compliant with that policy. And just to confirm that the policy has also been published on our website, as all policies. I'm happy to take any questions, but I think we've probably discussed this one in detail before, but if anything does stick out, please let me know.
Michelle, will the form be updated from the draft one?
Yes, I had a look after we spoke. I think what it's talking about when it talks about headings is about the relating to me and relating to family members or close colleagues. So what I'll do, I'll underline those to make it more clearer. But the form itself will largely stay the same once I've done those two amends.
Okay. Councillor Satter.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. When you send out the declarations, could you add the link to the training session recording? I do have an awful lot of these things in my files and different ways of accessing different sorts of training. So can you help me out, help me out?
Absolutely, that's a good idea. I will do that. Yeah,
I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No other hands showing. So we have been asked to note that. We will get back to you, Michelle, with our completed forms as quickly as we can. So thank you. We'd like to move on. Corey, you have the valuation update, is that yourself, Mark, or someone else?
No, that's myself, Chair. That's Corey.
Okay, Corey. Okay, Corey, over to you.
Thank you. Just a short report this time. I haven't got much to add to the report other just to give you a little bit of flavour to what's been said on there. So at the moment, we're in the stage of having conversations with employers about the draft contribution rates. We're coming right to the end of that process now. The deadline for employers to agree those contribution rates is the 31st of January. We've had 151 out of 282 employers confirm that they're happy with the rates. We're not having discussions with all of the remaining ones on there, so we are chasing up sign off for the ones that haven't come back to us yet. We sent a final reminder out this week to remind them that they need to confirm that to us, but if they don't come back, then we will be writing to them just to confirm that the draft rates are what will be taken ahead. So it doesn't hold the project up in any way. It's just something that we wanted to tidy things up and have best practice to make sure the employers had actually acknowledged the new contribution rate. We've also been having a conversation with a number of employers, some about affordability of their contribution rates, but there are 6 employers who would be considered to be what we've previously called tier 3 employers, a group of employers that the scheme as a whole across the country has been trying to find a solution for, because these are risky employers that don't have a guarantor behind them. If they were to cease and not be able to afford their deficit, it would be spread across all other employers in the fund. And they often feel that they are trapped in the fund with high contribution rates and no meaningful way to be able to exit without a large exit payment. They're usually small charities in those cases. So there's 6 of those that the funding position is actually quite good at the moment. They could leave the fund without having to make a payment to us. So they are reviewing that situation and potentially having consultations with their few remaining staff to close the LGPS to new accrual. So we've been facilitating those conversations. Other than that, I don't have anything to add to the the report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. The conference, I think, neatly summed those people up as they can't afford to stay, and in the past, at least, they couldn't afford to go either. Yes, problem that hopefully will change. So thank you very much. Again, thank you, but I see no hands up. So we've been asked to note that update, and we have done. Thank you very much, Corey.
Thank you, Chair.
We now have the forward agenda plan. Anybody got questions on that?
Can I just make a couple of comments on that?
Yes, of course, Michelle.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments on the 2 action plans that we keep rescheduling. So we've got the Code of Practice Action Plan for April now, and the Good Governance Review. Obviously, we're waiting on national guidance on both of those, but we have heard that the Code of Practice Action Plan in particular should be coming through soon. Not quite sure what soon means in practical terms, but hopefully within the next couple of months or so, there will be some movement on that to get that action plan to you in April or the meeting after. Also, just another note to say, obviously the agenda plans at the moment are just going up to April. So the intention will be that when the 2023-24 business plans are agreed and in place, that will then drive the agendas largely for 23-24, and obviously any upcoming items that are going in the pension industry. So by April, we will have the full suite for the year.
Thank you. Councillor Slatter.
Yeah, that looks all fine. Just a small point. I think we agreed that we'd like an annual in-person meeting. Had we agreed it was going to be the AGM, if it's not quite that, is it, in this context, but the post-elections one, summer. Was there an agreement?
No, I don't think we'd actually gone beyond just discussing that.
Okay.
I think there was certainly support among most of the board members for a single annual fiscal get together, and the first meeting of the new year would be a sensible one for that. Barry, was your point on that or something else?
Yeah, it was just to clarify. I think we literally just agreed the one meeting.
And that would be hybrid anyway. So if it's at Shah Hall, presumably.
Yeah. But yeah, personally, I've got no objection to quite like having at least once a year meeting.
And having it in the summer would make sense.
Fine, I'll leave it with you, Chair.
Assuming we have some sort of summer. So I think if my memory serves me right, there was some mention at the conference as to the definition of both soon and summer.
Right, we won't try and get a KPI spelt out on that one.
Well, it was in relation to government progress, I think. So, thank you on the agenda plan. So if, can I suggest that we actually do hold will be a May meeting or June, not quite sure which, as an in-person meeting, and may even be July. And the first item on there will be election of chair and vice chair. Val?
Sorry to be a bit of a pain here, Dennis. Would it be possible to have it at the next meeting? It's just that I'm on holiday on next July one. It'd be nice to meet you guys.
Right.
All right. Are you happy that I leave that with Rhiannon and myself to organise?
Yeah.
Those? It will also depend upon the availability of the room, matters of that nature. So we'll do what we can, Val, so that you can actually meet this person.
So you're not joining us from beside a swimming pool, Val, because we'll all be very annoyed by that.
No, I was hoping we might go to the pub afterwards.
And there may be other good venues that can do hybrid without too many technical issues. So, leave it open with Dennis to find us somewhere.
I'm hoping. I'm not sure whether actually on the day you have the meeting, I'm actually on the plane.
Oh,
so that's not so easy.
That's another reason, then. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Fine. We'll take it as noted. There's some work to do there on where those meetings will be. Can I move on now? Mark, business plan update, briefly.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, in the interest of time, I'll mainly concentrate on the executive summary and the RAG status. We just have the one red activity, which was a conscious decision to move some resource within the projects team that was going to concentrate on this to help support the retirements team whilst we get some new members in and they're skilled up elsewhere in the service. So we've deliberately delayed this for that reason, and they're starting work on this project mid-February, so it will roll into next year's business plan as well. But obviously retirement, deaths, dependency are our absolute priority within the service. The only other thing on that I want to mention is on the amber undecided leavers, and I do have a correction to the information in the detailed part. So it absolutely is correct in that it says that we have had a net reduction of 800 odd cases now. We wanted 2,500 by the end of the year, but this is a 3-year project. The correction is that we haven't completed 7,800 ring fence cases. 7,800 is actually the number we've completed in terms of unprocessed leavers across the board for the Cambridgeshire Fund. The actual number of backlog cases that we've done is pretty much the same as what our target for the year was, which was 2,500. Unfortunately, the build up in BAU that I'd mentioned before is what's caused us to only do 800 odd net. So that's just a correction. The only thing other thing I wanted to mention before opening it up to questions was, you'll notice on the financials, there is a bigger variance than usual this year, and it's all to do with the staffing cost. Really, that's the inflationary pay increases that were paid, which were higher than we budgeted. So we've got a lesson for next year to make sure that we try to put in an adequate amount for that. We've also been very close, or indeed just under, our vacancy factor. So in previous years, if we've got the inflationary increase wrong, we had a bit of a buffer, which we simply haven't got this year, because our resourcing has been pretty close, in fact, very, very close to what I'd expect throughout the year. That's the update. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Barry?
Just to go back to your point, Dennis, from the conference, the fact that staffing issues could be and pay could be an issue of the future with people working from home, which basically makes it a UK market. So the amount you pay, you're in competition with other employers.
Yeah, we pay. So our issue is not attracting staff into junior positions. We certainly seem to be able to do that and pay enough. It's keep getting the right skill mix across teams, particularly as people move around to more specialist roles, such as in governance, in very technical projects, that sort of thing. We do. I think, as every fund, you are very lucky if you can recruit a really experienced specialist in a particular role. That's fair to say. But we're okay. I think the only other thing I'd add is that I do think we pay decently across the service for roles, in terms of where we sit with other funds. And so, we don't have the problem of, for example, a fund being able to pay dramatically more elsewhere and offer home working, so they can live in any part of the country. I do think we pay appropriately for different roles, and I don't believe there is any issue coming out of the pay and grading project either to affect that.
Mark, can I just ask a question on Appendix B, which is the climate action plan?
Yeah.
There appear to be a few of the Q3-4 targets, and I'm assuming that's calendar 3-4 quarter rather than, yes, it is calendar year. Is there a problem there, or just that things imminent?
There are some. So we have been there has been considerable work on the passive selection, and we were awaiting some research / due diligence work, which was actually concluded a couple of weeks ago by Mercer. So there is movement on that now, and we will be feeding back to the next investment subcommittee the outcome of that for Cambridgeshire. So we have a viable implementation options that I've spoken to the chair about, and she is happy for us to proceed on. Some of the other work we'll have to review that too. So we certainly have been undertaking some of his engagement, but we'll have to look at the profiling of that again. I think it's fair to say some things will inevitably get changed in terms of the dates as we move through these plans. But the major piece of work, I'm pleased to say, we have progressed pretty much to plan.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions? And for Ben, I think the profit or losses on disposal on assets on page 315 just does sort of show the impact of what's been happening this year. we'll
Yes,
see next year in the financial reports.
yeah. We will never get those forecasting right on that either. It's fair to say we just use the actuarial assumption for asset outperformance, and then adjust it as we go through the year, depending on the each quarter's performance.
Yeah. Okay. With no questions, then we've been asked to note that update, and we have done so. The remainder of the agenda are items that are exempt, and therefore I ask members whether we agree to resolve that the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the reports contain exempt information under paragraph 1 and 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed in discussion, as it contains information relating to an individual and the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. If members, Councillor Slatter, is that an agree?
Well, not quite. It's just to check. I mean, usually these come at the end of a meeting, but they're straddling number 12, which is the risk monitoring. Is that meant to be confidential? Or are we going to readmit the masses of press and public for number 12? Just checking.
The item 12 in my pack is marked as exempt.
Right, okay.
Yeah, that's
I
correct.
agree, Chair.
It is, yes. I didn't think such things usually were, but I just
Same
wanted
here,
to check.
Chair.
So thank you, that's agreed.
Me
So
then.
please can